The air in the Sector 7 meat market was thick and smelled of rust. This was not a place for the weak. In this corner of the galaxy, the strong ruled, and the small were forgotten. Among all the species, humans were considered the smallest and the weakest. To the big, scaly aliens of the Syndicate, humans were nothing more than space rats, good for fixing machines, but too fragile for real power. Elias walked through the crowded market, his hood pulled low. Around him, massive creatures with 4 arms and glowing eyes shouted prices for exotic meats and slaves. He ignored them all. His eyes were fixed on the high-risk block at the back of the market. There she was. Her name was Kala, but the auctioneers just called her Item 402. She was a giantess, nearly 15 feet tall. Her skin was a pale, beautiful blue, but it was covered in scars and dirt. She was forced to sit on her knees because the heavy iron chains around her neck were bolted to the floor. Even while sitting, she was taller than most aliens standing up. Too big to breed, the announcer shouted, his voice echoing through the speakers. Too stubborn to work. This giantess has failed every test. She consumes too much food and provides no value. Look at her size. She is pure muscle. Sold for meat. Starting price, 500 credits. The crowd laughed. To them, she wasn't a living being. She was just a mountain of protein. Kala kept her head down. Her long, white hair covered her face. She had given up. In her mind, she was already dead. Elias stepped forward. He felt small, very small. Beside him stood a Gorak, a massive lizard-like alien who was bidding for the meat. The Gorak looked down at Elias and spat on the floor. Move, little monkey. This is a place for hunters, not pets. Elias didn't move. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, glowing data chip. It contained every single credit he had saved in 10 years of working in deep space mines. 5,000 credits, Elias said. His voice was calm, but it cut through the noise of the market. The market went silent. The announcer stopped talking. Even Kala's shoulders drifted upward for a second. 5,000 credits was a fortune. It was enough to buy a small spaceship. The human wants the giant, the announcer laughed, pointing a claw at Elias. What for, little man? To build a house on her shoulder? Or do you want to be crushed? The paperwork, Elias said, ignoring the insults. Prepare it. I am claiming her. The deal was done quickly. The aliens thought Elias was a fool. They took his money and handed him a heavy, vibrating remote control. This remote controlled the gravity collar around Kala's neck. If she moved too fast, one button would crush her windpipe. The merchant walked up to Elias, shaking his head. Listen, human. A warning. This one is from the Titan moons. She has killed 3 guards. She is dangerous. She will not thank you. The moment those chains are loose, she will crush you like a grape. Do yourself a favor, kill her now and take the meat. Elias didn't answer. He walked toward the giantess. As he got closer, the size difference was terrifying. Elias only reached her knee. He looked like a toy standing next to a mountain. The crowd gathered around, forming a circle. They weren't leaving, they wanted to see the human slaughter. They expected Kala to go into a rage and kill Elias the moment he got close. Kala finally raised her head. Her eyes were a deep, glowing violet, but they were filled with tears and anger. She looked at the small human. She expected him to hit her. She expected him to use the remote to hurt her, just like the others. Elias reached out. The crowd held their breath. But Elias didn't push the button. Instead, he climbed up the side of her cage and reached for the manual lock on her massive iron collar. What is he doing? Someone whispered. He's unlocking the physical bolt. It was dangerous. If the bolt came off, the collar would only be held by the electronic signal. Elias's hands were steady. Click. The heavy iron bar fell to the floor with a loud thud. Kala stiffened. Her muscles tensed. She could easily reach out and snap Elias's neck before he could even blink. She looked at his small hands, then at his face. She didn't see cruelty. She didn't see hunger. She saw something she hadn't seen in years, respect. Instead of attacking, Kala did something that shocked the entire market. She didn't roar. She didn't fight. Her massive body began to shake. She began to tremble. A giantess, capable of destroying buildings, was shivering in fear and confusion. Elias placed a hand gently on her massive blue hand. His hand was tiny compared to hers, but it was warm. "It's okay," Elias whispered in a voice only she could hear. "I'm not here to own you. I'm here to take you home." For the first time in her life, the giantess looked at a human and didn't see a weak creature. She saw a protector. The crowd stayed silent, confused and disappointed. There was no blood. There was only a small human standing guard over a giant, and a giant who was finally allowed to cry, the difficult escape. Elias and Kala left the auction block, but the danger was far from over. In a place like the Sector 7 market, buying something expensive was like putting a target on your back. Everyone knew Elias had credits, and everyone saw he was walking away with a prize that was currently too weak to fight back. Kala walked slowly. Her legs were stiff from months of being in a small cage. Every step she took made a heavy thud that vibrated through the floor. She looked around at the dark, narrow alleys of the spaceport with fear. She was a giant, but she felt like a lost child. "Stay close to me," Elias said, his eyes scanning the shadows. "The path to the landing pad is through the lower gut. It's not a friendly place." Kala looked down at him. She was confused. "Human," she spoke, her voice like low thunder. "Why walk? You have the remote. You can make me run. You can hurt me to move faster." Elias didn't even look at the remote. He tucked it deep into his jacket. "I don't drive my friends with remotes, Kala. We walk together." As they entered the lower gut, a dark, steam-filled tunnel, the atmosphere changed. The neon lights flickered, and the sound of the busy market faded away. It was too quiet. Suddenly, Elias stopped. From the shadows, 5 tall, muscular aliens stepped out. They were Krells, scavengers known for their sharp teeth and 4 arms. Their leader, a scarred alien named Varkas, held a glowing plasma blade. "Not so fast, little rat," Varkas hissed, his multiple eyes focusing on Elias. "A human with a 5,000 credit giantess. That's too much wealth for a tiny creature like you. Leave the girl and your credits, and maybe I won't peel your skin off." Kala stepped back, her chains rattling. She tried to stand tall to protect Elias, but she stumbled. She was malnourished and exhausted. The Krells laughed. "Look at her." Varkas mocked. "The great titan can barely stand. She is just a mountain of meat waiting to be carved." Elias stepped in front of Kala. It looked ridiculous, a small human standing between a gang of monsters and a 15-foot giantess. But Elias wasn't shaking. He reached into his belt and pulled out a small, silver sphere. "This is your only warning," Elias said, his voice cold and steady. "Step aside. I paid for her life. I'm not letting you take it." The Krell leader laughed so hard his scales rattled. "What will you do? Throw a toy at me? Kill him." 2 Krells lunged forward with incredible speed. Kala let out a scream of "No." She tried to reach for Elias, thinking he was about to die. But Elias was faster. He didn't use a gun. He clicked the silver sphere and dropped it at his feet. Suddenly, a massive wave of high-frequency sound exploded from the device. To Kala, it was just a loud hum, but to the Krells, whose ears were sensitive to high frequencies, it was like having a bomb go off inside their brains. The attackers fell to their knees, screaming and clutching their heads. Their blue blood leaked from their ears. Human trickery. Varkas roared, trying to swing his plasma blade through the pain. Elias didn't stop. He pulled out a small, gravity displacement tool, a device humans used for moving heavy mining equipment. He pointed it at a stack of heavy metal crates above Varkas and reversed the setting. Whoosh! The heavy crates didn't fall, they were pulled toward the Krells like they were made of paper. The gang was pinned against the wall by the weight of the crates. They weren't dead, but they weren't moving anytime soon. Kala stared in total shock. She had seen many species fight with brute strength and giant lasers. But she had never seen anyone fight like this. The human hadn't even broken a sweat. He used his mind and his tools to turn the environment into a weapon. "Come on," Elias said, grabbing her hand, or rather, a finger, since her hand was so large. "More will come soon. We need to reach the small hope." They ran, as fast as Kala's tired legs could carry her. They could hear sirens and the shouts of more syndicate guards behind them. The spaceport was locking down. "The ship is right there." Elias pointed to a small, beat-up freighter at the end of the dock. It looked like a piece of junk compared to the shiny warships around it. "Wait." Kala pulled back. A massive steel security gate was closing. It was 20 feet of solid reinforced metal. "We are trapped." Elias looked at the closing gate, then at the guards rushing toward them from the other side. He looked at Kala. "I can't lift that gate, Kala. But you can. You are a Titan. Your people were built to move moons." I am weak," she whispered, looking at her scarred arms. "I am just meat." Elias looked her in the eyes. "They told you that so you wouldn't fight back. They lied. You are a queen of the stars. Now, show them why they were afraid of you." Kala felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, pride. She roared, a sound so loud it shattered the glass of the nearby control tower. She lunged forward and shoved her massive blue hands under the closing gate. The metal groaned. The motors of the gate screamed in protest. With a final, earth-shaking heave, Kala ripped the gate upward, tearing the hydraulics right out of the floor. Elias grinned. "That's my girl. Now, get on the ship." They scrambled inside just as plasma bolts began hitting the hull. The engines of the small Hope roared to life. As the ship blasted off into the dark sky, leaving the hunters behind, Kala collapsed on the floor of the cargo hold. She was safe. For the first time in her life, she was on a ship where she wasn't in a cage. But as Elias closed the airlock, his face turned serious. He looked at the radar. "We got away from the market," he whispered, "but the syndicate just sent a long-range tracker signal. They aren't letting 5,000 credits and a royal giantess go that easily." The suspense hung heavy in the air. They were in space, but they were being hunted, the secret on the ship. The small Hope was a small ship, and with a 15-foot giantess inside, it felt even smaller. Kala had to sit in the main cargo hold, her head almost touching the ceiling. The walls were lined with human tools, spare parts, and flickering monitors. For the first time in years, there were no bars between her and the world. Elias walked into the hold carrying a large medical kit. Kala flinched when she saw the metal box. In the meat market, metal boxes meant pain. "Easy," Elias said softly. He sat on a crate a few feet away from her. "I'm not going to hurt you. Those scars on your arms, they look infected. If we don't treat them, you'll get sick." Kala looked at her massive, bruised arms. "Why care?" she asked, her voice trembling. "In the galaxy, the small eat the smaller. You are small. You should be afraid of me." Elias smiled a sad smile. Humans are strange, Kala. We spent thousands of years fighting each other until we realized that being big or strong doesn't mean anything if you don't have a heart. My people have a saying, the measure of a man is how he treats those who can do nothing for him. He began to apply a cooling human gel to her wounds. The pain started to fade instantly. Kala watched him with wide, purple eyes. He was so tiny, yet his hands were so steady. But you didn't just buy me because you are kind, Kala said, her voice becoming serious. You spent 10 years of credits. Why? Elias stopped. He looked around to make sure the ship's AI was the only one listening. He stood up and walked to a holographic projector in the center of the room. You're right, Elias whispered. I knew who you were the moment I saw the markings on your neck. The ones the slavers tried to hide with dirt. He pressed a button, and a blue hologram filled the room. It showed ancient star maps and a race of giants standing next to golden towers. The slavers called you a breeder or meat, Elias said, his voice filled with anger. But my ancestors' records call you something else. You are a star guardian. Your DNA isn't just flesh and bone. It is a biological key. Kala gasped. She looked at the hologram. My mother, she told me stories, but I thought they were fairy tales. They weren't, Elias explained. Thousands of years ago, your people built the great gates, wormholes that allow travel between galaxies. When your race was attacked, the gates were locked. Only the DNA of a royal guardian can reopen them. The syndicate doesn't want to sell you for meat, Kala. They pretended you were worthless so no one else would look at you. They were waiting for the Red Hand, the Emperor's elite hunters, to come and take you to a secret lab. Kala's face went pale. A lab? They want to open the gates. If they open the gates, Elias said, the syndicate will have an army that can move anywhere in the universe in seconds. Every peaceful planet, including Earth, will be destroyed. The weight of the secret hit the room like a physical blow. Kala wasn't just a survivor, she was the key to the fate of the entire galaxy. And Elias, a simple human miner, was the only one standing between her and a lifetime of being a laboratory experiment. Suddenly, the ship's red lights began to flash. A loud, piercing alarm echoed through the hull. Warning, the ship's computer spoke. High-speed projectile detected. Impact in 30 seconds. They found us already. Elias jumped toward the cockpit. That's impossible. I jammed the frequencies. He looked at the long-range scanner. His heart sank. It wasn't just a scout ship. It was a Red Hand interceptor, a black, jagged ship designed for one thing, capturing and killing. Kala, hold on to the floor braces. Elias yelled. They aren't trying to blow us up. They're using an EMP harpoon. If that hits us, the ship's power dies, and we're sitting ducks. The small Hope groaned as Elias pushed the engines to the limit. Outside the window, the black interceptor was gaining ground. It looked like a shark chasing a minnow. Human. Kala shouted over the roar of the engines. The tracker. It is not in the ship. Elias looked back. What do you mean? Kala pointed to her own chest, near her heart. Under her blue skin, a faint, rhythmic red light was pulsing. They put it inside me, she whispered in horror. They knew I would be stolen or sold. I am a beacon. As long as I am alive, they will find you. They will kill you to get to me. Elias looked at the scanner. The interceptor was locking its weapons. He looked at Kala's terrified face. He had a choice, he could eject the cargo to save himself, or he could stay and fight a battle he couldn't win. Elias gripped the flight controls and smirked. Well, he muttered to himself, I guess today is a good day to show them how stubborn humans can be. Kala, he shouted. Get to the back. There's a manual override for the cargo doors. If they try to board us, don't let them inside. I'm going to try something crazy. What are you doing? Kala cried out. I'm turning the ship around, Elias said, his eyes burning with defiance. They think we're running. They don't expect a human to attack. The small Hope flipped 180 degrees in mid-space, heading straight for the massive interceptor. It was a game of chicken, and the human wasn't planning on blinking. The small Hope shook violently. A massive, jagged metal claw, the breech hook of the Red Hand interceptor, had smashed through the ship's hull. The sound was like 1,000 nails screaming on a chalkboard. Decompression alert, the ship's computer yelled before the power flickered and died. The ship was now running on emergency red lights. Everything was bathed in a blood-red glow. They are here, Kala whispered. Her giant body was pressed against the cold metal floor of the cargo hold. She could hear the heavy boots of the Red Hand soldiers walking on the outer hull of the ship. Elias didn't panic. He moved with a strange, calm speed. He wasn't grabbing a giant laser gun or a shield. Instead, he was pulling wires out of the wall and opening a small box of gravity mines, tools used for heavy lifting, not war. Kala, listen to me, Elias said, his voice low and sharp. They are coming for you. They think I am a weak human and you are a broken slave. That is their biggest mistake. They expect a fight. We are going to give them a nightmare. But they are the Red Hand. Kala cried. They have never lost a hunt. There's a first time for everything, Elias smirked. He handed her a small headset. Go to the very back of the hold. Stay in the shadows. Do not move until I tell you. Suddenly, the airlock door hissed and exploded inward. Smoke filled the corridor. 3 soldiers stepped inside. They were Xylos, insect-like aliens with 4 arms, wearing black, shiny armor. They carried neurostunners that could paralyze an elephant in one shot. The leader, Commander Zrax, looked around the dark ship and laughed. A clicking, disgusting sound. Human. Come out. We know the Titan girl is here. Give her to us, and we will kill you quickly. If not, we will take our time. Silence. Only the sound of the ship's leaking pipes could be heard. Zrax signaled his men to move forward. They stepped into the main cargo hold. It was a massive, dark room. They could see the giant shape of Kala hiding in the corner, her purple eyes glowing with fear. There she is, Zrax hissed. Grab the meat. But as the first soldier stepped into the center of the room, Elias's voice echoed over the speakers. Welcome to Earth physics, boys. Click, Elias didn't fire a gun. He tapped a button on his wrist pad. Suddenly, the artificial gravity in the cargo hold didn't just turn off, it went crazy. In one spot, the gravity became 10 times stronger. The first soldier was instantly slammed into the floor, his armor cracking under his own weight. He couldn't even lift a finger. In another spot, the gravity reversed. The second soldier flew upward, crashing into the ceiling with a loud crack. Commander Zrax, who was still near the door, growled and fired his weapon into the darkness. Show yourself, coward. Elias dropped from a ceiling vent right behind Zrax. He wasn't 15 feet tall, but he moved like a shadow. He jammed a thermal paste pack onto Zrax's jetpack. What is this? Zrax yelled, trying to grab Elias with his 4 arms. Human glue, Elias replied, kicking off the wall and sliding under a heavy table. 3 seconds later, the jetpack overheated and exploded, not killing Zrax, but pinning his arms to his back with melted metal. The elite hunter was now a helpless prisoner on the floor. Elias stood up, breathing hard. He looked at the 3 unstoppable hunters. One was crushed by gravity, one was stuck to the ceiling, and their leader was glued to the floor. Kala crawled out of the shadows. She looked at the scene in total disbelief. You defeated them. In less than a minute. Insects are fast, Elias said, wiping sweat from his forehead. But humans have spent our whole history learning how to squash them. But the victory was short-lived. A loud thud came from the cockpit area. Warning, the computer gasped. Main airlock breached. Secondary boarding party entering. Elias's face went pale. There's more of them. A lot more. Zrax, pinned to the floor, began to laugh. You think, 3 soldiers, is a red hand hunt? There are 50 more coming, human. They will tear this ship apart bolt by bolt. Elias looked at Kala. He knew he couldn't trap 50 soldiers. His tricks were running out. He looked at the royal DNA markings on Kala's arm. Kala, Elias said, his voice trembling slightly. I can't win a war alone. I need you to stop being meat. I need you to be the Star Guardian. If you don't fight now, there won't be a tomorrow for either of us. Kala looked at the hunters who had tortured her for years. She looked at Elias, who was willing to die for her. Something inside her snapped. The fear that had kept her small for years was replaced by a burning, blue fire in her soul. She stood up. Her head hit the ceiling, but this time, she didn't flinch. She grabbed a massive metal support beam and ripped it out of the wall like it was a toothpick. Elias, she said, her voice deep and powerful, like an earthquake. Open the internal doors. Let them come. The suspense was gone. It was time for the meat to hunt the hunters. The internal doors of the small Hope hissed open. 50 elite Red Hand soldiers poured into the ship like a black tide. They were armed with heavy plasma rifles and energy shields. They expected to find a terrified human and a broken giantess. Instead, they found a corridor filled with thick, white fog. Thermal vision, now, the new commander ordered. But when they switched to thermal, they saw nothing. Elias had cracked the ship's cooling pipes, filling the air with liquid nitrogen gas. In this cold, their high-tech sensors were useless. Where are they? A soldier whispered, his 4 hands shaking. Suddenly, a massive, blue hand reached out of the fog. It grabbed a soldier by his chest plate and pulled him into the darkness. There was a short scream, then silence. Over there. Fire. The soldiers sprayed plasma bolts into the fog, but they were hitting empty walls. They didn't realize that Elias was watching them from the ceiling vents. Using the ship's internal speakers, he played the sound of Kala's roar from different directions, making the soldiers spin around in confusion. Now, Kala. Left side. Elias shouted through the headset. Kala stepped out of the mist. She looked like a goddess of war. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was using a massive steel door she had ripped off its hinges as a shield. Plasma bolts bounced off the thick metal. With one giant swing, she sent 5 soldiers flying across the room, their armor shattering against the bulkheads. But the Red Hand wasn't finished. They brought in their secret weapon, a Titan Slayer droid. It was a 10-foot-tall mechanical monster with 4 rotating laser cannons. Target locked, the droid's cold voice echoed. Kala froze. She knew that droid. It was the same model that had captured her family years ago. The trauma made her heart race. The droid raised its cannons, ready to turn her into ash. Hey, tin can. Over here. The droid spun its head 180 degrees. Elias was standing on top of a fuel tank, holding a simple flare gun. A flare, the commander laughed from the back. You think a light show will stop a war machine? It's not for the machine, Elias said with a dangerous grin. It's for the chemistry. Elias fired the flare, not at the droid, but at the ceiling. The flare hit a series of fire suppression canisters that Elias had rigged with human-made explosives. A sticky, highly flammable foam exploded everywhere, covering the droid from head to toe. Kala, hit the override. Elias yelled. Kala understood. She slammed her fist into the wall panel, activating the ship's emergency purge system. A blast of pure oxygen filled the room. The combination of the flare, the foam, and the oxygen turned the droid into a giant fireball. The Titan Slayer melted in seconds, its circuit screaming as it collapsed. The remaining soldiers were terrified. They had never seen a species fight like this. Humans didn't just use guns, they used the very air and walls around them. You are monsters, the commander screamed, backing away. You're just a tiny human. Why do you care about her so much? Elias walked forward, stepping over the broken pieces of the droid. He looked small, covered in soot and oil, but he looked like a giant to the aliens. That's the difference between us, Elias said, his voice cold and hard. You see a prize. I see a friend. And in the human dictionary, friend means I'll burn down the whole galaxy to keep her safe. Kala stood behind Elias, her massive shadow covering him like a protective cape. She looked down at the soldiers. She wasn't Item 402 anymore. She was a Star Guardian, and she had a human by her side. Leave, Kala thundered, her voice shaking the entire ship. Leave now, or stay and become dust. The surviving Red Hand soldiers didn't wait. They scrambled back into their boarding craft and detached in a panic. They didn't even look back as they jumped into warp speed. The small Hope was quiet again, though it was now a smoking wreck. Elias slumped against a wall, his body finally feeling the exhaustion. Kala knelt down beside him. She picked him up gently, holding him in her massive palms like a precious treasure. We won, she whispered. Tears of joy fell from her eyes, each one the size of a human cup. We actually won. I told you, Elias coughed, smiling. Never underestimate a human with a plan. But as they looked out the broken viewport, they saw something beautiful and terrifying. The battle had damaged the ship's engines, but the energy leak was reacting with Kala's DNA. A strange, golden light was beginning to pulse from her skin, and in the distance, an ancient, hidden, star gate began to glow for the first time in 10,000 years. The real journey was only just beginning, the small Hope was dying. Smoke filled the cockpit, and the ship's engines were making a horrible grinding sound. But outside the viewport, something miraculous was happening. An ancient structure, hidden for centuries behind a dead moon, was waking up. It was the Great Star Gate. It was a massive ring, miles wide, covered in glowing golden runes. As Kala's DNA reacted with the ship's energy, the runes began to spin. It's beautiful, Kala whispered, her eyes reflecting the golden light. It's a way out, Elias said, coughing from the smoke. But we have a problem. On the radar, a massive shadow appeared. It wasn't a small interceptor this time. It was a Syndicate command ship, a floating fortress the size of a city. The Syndicate leader, a cold-blooded alien known as the Archon, appeared on their view screen. Human, the Archon's voice was like ice. You have opened the gate for us. We thank you for your service. Now, step away from the Titan and die. If you move, our main laser will turn your tiny ship and that gate into stardust. The command ship's main cannon began to glow with a terrifying red light. They weren't just here to capture Kala anymore, they were ready to destroy everything if they couldn't own it. Elias, Kala said, her voice trembling. The gate, it's not fully open. It needs a massive jump of power. The kind of power only this ship's core can give. But if we use the core, the ship will explode. Elias looked at the massive enemy fleet, then at the Golden Gate, and finally at Kala. He reached out and touched her giant thumb. I didn't save you from a meat market just to let you die here, Elias said. There's a human trick for this, too. It's called all or nothing. What are you going to do? Kala asked, her heart racing. I'm going to ram the Syndicate's main laser, Elias said, his voice steady. When the explosion happens, the energy will hit the gate. It will blast it open. You have to jump into the escape pod, Kala. It's built for giants like you for emergency cargo. No. Kala cried, her tears falling like rain. I won't leave you. You are the only friend I have. Elias smiled, a brave, stubborn human smile. Listen to me, Kala. You are a queen. Your people are waiting on the other side. Humans, we are small, but we are loud. We make sure the world remembers us. Now, go. Elias pushed a button, and the floor beneath Kala opened. Her massive escape pod launched into the dark vacuum of space. Elias was alone in the cockpit. He turned the small Hope toward the Syndicate command ship. He pushed the engines to 200%. The ship began to melt from the heat. Targeting main cannon, Elias whispered. The Archon's voice screamed over the radio, stop. You are insane. You will kill us all. That's the thing about humans, Elias said, his hand on the self-destruct trigger. We don't like bullies. Boom. The small Hope hit the command ship's laser just as it fired. The explosion was blinded. A wave of pure white energy hit the Stargate. The golden ring roared, and a tunnel of light opened, a bridge to a forgotten galaxy. Kala's escape pod was sucked into the gate. She screamed Elias's name as the light swallowed her. The other side. Kala woke up on a beach with purple sand and a sky filled with 3 moons. She was home. The Titan home world. Around her, other giants, her people, were coming out of the forests, looking at the gate in wonder. They were free. The Syndicate could never follow them here. Kala stood up, her 15-foot frame finally tall and proud. But her heart was heavy. She looked at the closing gate, waiting for a sign. Suddenly, a small, charred object fell from the gate just before it shut forever. It was a small, human-sized emergency life raft. Kala ran into the water, her heart pounding. She pulled the raft to the shore and ripped the door open with her bare hands. Inside, covered in soot and bruised, but still breathing, was Elias. He had used the ship's last second to eject his own tiny pod into the blast wave. He opened his eyes and saw the giantess looking down at him. Did it work? Elias whispered. Kala picked him up and held him against her heart. She let out a roar of joy that could be heard across the entire planet. Yes, little hero, she sobbed. It worked. The narrator's voice concludes, the galaxy is a big place, filled with monsters and giants. But if you ever find yourself in trouble, pray that a human is nearby. Because they are the only ones crazy enough to fight a god, just to save a friend. The end.